What do the Trump folks do? The Trump folks have said, Christy, no, continues to repeat that Renee Good is a domestic terrorist with no justification whatsoever. They trotted her out on the weekend talk shows where she was spewing all kinds of nonsense. She says, we're going to send hundreds more ICE agents into Minneapolis. What? Whenever they do some latest jackass thing, quite often it's deliberate jackassery, if that's a term, because they're going to steal news cycle. And instead of going through the cases systematically to say exactly where they are, you got like some other. Because I've got a piece up on EA Worldview if anybody's interested, by a really good writer who's been writing for him, Mustafa Al-Dabah. And Mustafa has come out today and said, look, it's a provocative piece called Why the Good Fight is Not Enough. And he's saying, look, we can't just talk about doing the good fight here. You've got to realize that you're dealing with opponents who they're not confronting you on the basis of discussion. They're not confronting you on the basis of the law or on the basis of responsible politics. They're doing this through provocative, clickbait, disinformation, etc. And if you just keep chasing them, you're always going to be chasing.
You are listening to CEO Talk.
My guest is Professor Scott Lucas, a highly experienced and globally renowned expert in American politics, US and British foreign policy, and a wide range of international affairs, with specific focus on the Middle East, Iran, Europe, and Asia. He also has expertise in the new media, intelligence services, and propaganda. Scott is a frequent and leading political analyst on major international media outlets, including Times Radio, BBC, CNN, Sky News, Al Jazeera English, France 24, and many others. He has also been an active journalist since 1979 and is the founder and editor-in-chief of EA Worldview, a prominent news site that provides daily news and analysis of global affairs. Okay guys, I need a very big favor from you. If you are watching on YouTube, please make sure you hit the subscribe button, because that makes a massive difference for our podcast. It literally costs you nothing other than a split-second click. But if you're also watching or listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure that you give us a follow there. But in order for it to count, you also need to leave us a review. Please feel free to give us whatever review you think that it's fair, but it's important that you do, because otherwise they don't count your following. Why? I have no idea, but that's just how it is. So I'll really, really appreciate it if you do that. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the episode.
Yet another, I don't think we should call it emergency episode anymore. I mean, this is a regular thing now, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you know, the last time we had a chat was, at the time of the recording of this episode, that was last week when we had our live episode on Tuesday. And my goodness, man, it's been a long time, but it's only been a week because so much had happened. I mean, it's like we had this conversation before we recorded, like my brain is all over the place. In terms of misinformation, because this episode is part of the Misinformation Watch. It's the first edition for 2026. And there's, oh my goodness, so much misinformation. But I really want to focus on the whole situation with ICE and Renee Good. But before we start there, I mean, how you've been doing? I mean, because I know you've been 24/7 in multiple shows and stuff like that. I feel guilty asking you to come here, man.
Well, no, don't feel guilty. This is like my break here. I get to chat with you, and I'm like, it is like permanent state of emergency. I mean, it's not like, you know, it used to be like I would say, okay, I'm going to wake up this morning and I'm going to see what Trump has tweeted overnight, and you know, and maybe it's a bit crazy, maybe it's a bit off the wall, but maybe nothing comes of it, right? And now it's like, I know when I wake up each day that it's like, no, that we're in situations that are already emergency status, and it's likely to be so for some time. So I guess if I could describe that to you, you know, when we talked last week, you know, like we were looking at Venezuela, and that Maduro had been kidnapped, and it's like, okay, this Trump and this inner circle trying to enforce American domination in the Western Hemisphere, and how far can it go? And we'll talk in a minute about Venezuela, because there are a couple of twists in the story. But then over the course of the week, you would have had the expansion of that threat overseas to Greenland, to this, and it just tell you how bizarre this is. The bizarre is that Trump and some officials in the Trump administration, not all officials are on board with this, but some officials are saying all options are on the table. But what do you mean all options? You mean military options? And they go, well, yeah. So wait a minute. The reality check here. You're talking about the U.S. invading Greenland, right? Where the U.S. already has a military base and already has rights to expand that base. But they're going to invade the country anyway, even though Greenland is part of Denmark, which is a NATO member. So the U.S., a member of NATO, even if Trump and J.D. Vance don't like it very much, member of NATO is going to attack another NATO member. Up until, in the past few years, what we've been talking about is the threat of Russia attacking a NATO member.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll attack the Baltic states. Maybe they'll attack Poland as they go beyond Ukraine. And now it's not Russia attacking NATO members. It's the Trump folks.
Yeah.
Really? Now, and as much as I could tell people, and I do think that the play here is that the Trump folks are trying to bully Denmark into giving up Greenland. Well, I don't think we're going to get a military invasion. We're going to get intimidation, harassment, the attempt to bribe people in Greenland to split away from Denmark, although that's not going to work. But it's just even the threats being out there are bizarre. And so you had that. So you got Venezuela, and then Greenland is moving on. And then you've got the protest in Iran, which is a serious case for us to follow because Iranians want political rights. They want social rights. They want a better economic situation. But then Trump is blustering, I'm going to help the protesters with military attacks on the regime, which is like the last thing the protesters need. It would immediately undermine the legitimate protests they're putting out there. So you've got Iran, which is percolating here. Of course, Ukraine continues to trundle on with, actually, that's a better story. Ukraine and Europe actually putting Russia on the back foot. Mm-hmm. But then, in the midst of all of this, is then in Minneapolis, on that snowy morning, that Renee Nicole Good and her partner are coming back after they have dropped their 6-year-old child at school. Whether or not they planned to join this effectively neighborhood watch, or whether they came upon it, they joined what is a neighborhood watch. Americans understand that term, a neighborhood watch, because there are masked, unidentified federal agents who have entered this neighborhood of Minneapolis near a school, and they could just sweep up people, whether or not they're U.S. citizens or migrants, whether they're undocumented or legal, they could just go and sweep them up. So they joined this legitimate demonstration. People were, as you do when you've got ice in your neighborhood, you hit the whistles, you make other noise to signal, right? Which, by the way, if you really want an immediate thing, like the bizarre leaps of faith when this came out, this was on January 7th, so that was last Wednesday.
A day after.
Is that
a day after the January 6th anniversary?
The day after the January 6th anniversary, right? And it's like, what it reminded me of is that in the 1970s, when British troops would go into neighborhoods in Northern Ireland, including Belfast, the women would come out on the streets and they would bang trash can lids on the pavement, which was a warning signal that any folks who might get swept up, you go to ground. Well, here we are in a bit of a different situation, but 50 years later, you've got a neighborhood defending itself. And so Renee Nicole Good and her partner in the car. I didn't know all of this immediately when it happened, but this is piecing it together just to make this clear and put it on the record. And they're not blocking traffic. The ICE people are moving their pickup trucks and their vehicles around. In fact, Renee Good waved them through.
She was waving
when they moved. Yep. She was waving them through. So they're not blocking traffic. They're sitting there observing. And then these ICE agents get out of a pickup truck and they surround the car. And one of the, and as they, as they're surrounding, one of them's talking to Renee Good, and she's saying, I can't really, I don't hate you. It's not, in other words, I'm okay. I'm okay with you here.
Yeah.
No problem here. Now, her partner's giving it a bit of verbal aggro as she's following one of the ICE agents, a man named Jonathan Ross, as he is
the shooter
filming, as who's filming. So she follows John as he's going, and he's probably filming the car, taking license plate details, going around. And she's saying, look, and the car has Missouri plates on it because the Goods, Renee and Becca, have moved from Missouri with their child to Minnesota. And she said, says it'll be the same car when you come back and question us. Right? So she's filming it.
Yeah.
Anyway, all of a sudden it turns ugly. It turns ugly because one of the ICE agents puts his hand, he starts screaming to Renee Good, get out of the car, get out of the car, get out of the fucking car. And he reaches inside the driver's window. Now, at that point, Becca Good, who is getting back in the car, is telling her, drive, baby, just drive. Drive away from this scene. Jonathan Ross, meanwhile, who's got his cell phone in a hand, who's filming, right? And he's got his gun now in the other hand. He is at the left, he's off the front left corner of the car, right? Now, as the car moves, it deliberately moves away from him. It moves to the right of him, and the wheels are turned to the right to go up the road. And that is clear from every video that has been shown. Every video. Despite that, he fires as he is in the front of the car, but just off to the left of it. So he's not in danger of getting hit. He fires directly at Renee Nicole Good. Hits her in the head. As the car is still moving, and it's now moving to the right of him, as he is now to the side of it, he fires through the driver window, a second and a third shot.
Yep. And the window was open as well. So
the window's open, and he fired.
Yeah.
So these are kill shots. These are kill shots.
Because J.D. Vance, I believe, was trying to come up with an excuse. Oh, no, it was just one shot because there's no other bullet holes, whatever. So, the window was open. So
these are deliberate. If the first shot didn't kill her, these are kill shots. And as she goes, and as the car goes up the road, it runs into a car which is parked and so on. He now has gotten his phone back. Screaming, he goes, "Fucking bitch!" Right? Screams after her. Now, I'm just laying this out because I'm going to cut through all the misinformation, the deliberate disinformation is up here, and I'm just going to read one thing. It got to the point where a few days after this, and the videos were coming out, and everybody was dissecting the videos. CNN, New York Times, quite rightly, doing a really good job to show that the Jonathan Ross, the shooter, and no other ICE agent was in danger, and that they had simply killed a woman, an unarmed woman, right? Yeah. Because they just didn't like her, because they were frustrated, because they overreacted. An investigation should determine that. Right? The thing that struck me is that when the Trump administration tried to counterattack, actually, I should back this up, despite all this evidence that I've laid out to you, within 2 hours of the incident occurring, the Department of Homeland Security puts out a statement that says that Renee Nicole Good had surrounded ICE agents. I don't know how you surround agents with a single car.
With a car.
Yeah. I don't know how one person surrounds them with a single car, because they're like, a whole there's a whole squad of ICE agents who are moving through here. Yeah. So I don't know how you surround them, right? But supposedly she has surrounded them, and then she tries to ram them. So that statement is completely divorced from the facts, right? Which takes place. A half hour after the statement comes out, Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Director, comes out and says Renee Nicole Good was domestic terrorist, right? Domestic terrorism. Now, when they make those statements, a reminder, there is no investigation which has reached this conclusion. There is no investigation at all. That is because the ICE agents involved in the killing, including Jonathan Ross, had fled the scene.
It's like videos of him just walking away. He literally just
walks away. He walks away. Yeah. It says call 911. Call 911, right? And leaves it to another ICE agent that's there. He flees the scene. Now, whether or not a crime has occurred, when there's an investigation of an active scene, those who are involved do not leave. Point blank. there was a lame-ass excuse that came out that was repeated to defend Jonathan Ross, which is, oh, he's in hospital. Supposedly Trump was saying he's seriously injured. Look, he's walking away with apparently no injury at all, saying call 911. Right.
And swearing at the woman that he just shot as well, like you said.
Swearing at the woman that he shot.
So walking about. Yeah, it's like, that doesn't look like an injured man to me, but
They fled the scene. When people try to intervene to check on Renee Nicole Good, including a doctor, they are prevented from providing any kind of medical assistance if it could be given. And it's irrelevant if she's already been killed. It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
You still have an obligation to provide assistance. And the ICE agent says, oh, well, we have our own medics. Well, yeah, like where the hell are they? Okay. So they have compromised the scene of the investigation already, which has taken place. At the time that Homeland Security issued a statement and Kristi Noem comes out, right? They further compromise this because they refuse to cooperate with Minnesota state and local authorities. They refuse to hand over any information to state and local authorities, so you cannot have a proper investigation. And I've dealt with a few Trumpists on various interviews this week, and
yeah, I've seen a couple
who frankly don't know what they're talking about.
You can vent in here. This is your space, brother. So
frankly, I got one guy who's a final year undergraduate up at Queen's University Belfast, and that's because they could not. I'm pretty sure they couldn't get anybody from Republicans abroad to go opposite me on the program. Because they just will not come on with me now. And this guy comes on and he says, "Oh yeah, there's all kinds of precedents for this for the federal government." And I'm going, "Yeah, name a precedent for that. When there is a crime committed in a state like the state of Minnesota, state and local authorities have jurisdiction. Now, federal authorities may have claimed jurisdiction as well in this case because ICE was involved." But you don't shut out state and local authorities. That's what they've done. And then, again, because there's not a proper investigation, the Trump folks then tried to change the narrative with this ham-fisted release of the cell phone footage from Jonathan Ross, the killer, the shooter, if you want to not use such provocative language. Now, I'm going to walk you through this again. I hope you don't mind, because we'll put this up as a statement. You watch the video up there, and he's holding the cell phone, right? And he's clearly taking the details of the car, and Becca Good is behind him, yelling at him. And again, Renee Good's partner, she's yelling at him. There is no obstruction which is going on here. There's no obstruction of Jonathan Ross going around that car. None whatsoever. He positions himself. He goes around the front of the car and then positions himself just off that front left of the car. As his colleague goes up to the driver's side window. Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the fucking car.
I'm sure we can all agree that we live in a highly complicated information ecosystem, but also a highly biased information ecosystem. An ecosystem that is filled with vested interests, clickbaits, ideologies. But as an entrepreneur, decision maker, and indeed podcaster, it's super important for me to be able to dig through the stories beyond all that shadow of all the other nonsense. And I cannot tell you how frustrated I am when I see biased coverage when it comes to things like the environment, health, business, and indeed artificial intelligence, which is my key field of work. And as a neurodivergent person, it's always a huge challenge for me to patiently try and find unbiased approach to the story. And this is why I was so grateful to discover a tool called Ground News. Ground News is a phone app and a web app that offers clarity in an increasingly chaotic media landscape that we see today. And they offer quite a few different tools, but one of my absolute favorites is the blind spot tool, whereby it looks at the story and who reported that story, be it from the right-wing or left-wing media, and who owns the media, and what would be the potential vested interest for them to report the story in the way that they do. Even in AI, I see that kind of bias where, for example, left-wing media tend to be gloomy about AI regardless, and right-wing media tend to be overly optimistic and frankly delusional when it comes to AI. Both approaches are pretty dangerous, frankly, and that's why I think this tool is absolutely phenomenal to help you understand the balanced view, regardless of the topic that you're interested in. And they're offering a 40% discount on their Vantage plan, which is the top tier that I use personally, that gives you access to all of the tools that you need
and it works out less than $5 a month. It's basically like a cup of coffee a month. So you can go to ceoretort.com/ground news. And by subscribing, you're supporting the podcast, but also you're supporting their independence. As you know, I like to support independent companies. So that's again, ceoretort.com/ground news. And thank you, Ground News, for supporting the podcast. And now back to the episode. I've seen people on social media breaking down one interesting element, which I was like, wow, that's very well noticed. And I invite people to do the same. But as he was walking towards the front of the car, you could see that he switched the phone. So he was holding the phone on his right hand, and you could see that he switched the phone from his right hand to the left hand, basically preparing to he put his hand on his gun, because there's another video. You can see that he already had his hand on his gun, even before that guy walking to the window shouting to get out the fucking car.
Exactly.
So
exactly. He has pulled or is ready to pull his gun when there is no threat whatsoever. Car's not moving. Unarmed woman. There is no rationale for it. So he now wind up. I'd have to go back and check the video as to when the gun was pulled, at what point it was pulled. But I'm pretty sure, given the speed with which he reacted, it was pulled before that car started moving. Pretty sure.
He was definitely ready for it. Like I said,
he was definitely ready.
He switched the phone. He switched the phone before he went to the front. Like he was already trying to position himself in front of the car. And I saw an interview. I can't remember if it was on CNN or somewhere else, but sort of a retired officer, and he said, like, actually, no police officer would normally do that anyway. He would never intentionally stand in front of the car. I mean, that's nonsense, really. So
now it doesn't. His cell phone doesn't record the moment of the shooting. And this is what the Trump folks were counting on, right? Because there's a moment when, in fact, the cell phone jumps, right? It's like, it's scrambled. And they're trying to make it out like this is the moment he was hit by the car.
Yes.
Wrong. What has happened, reminder, he's got the cell phone in one hand, and then he is shooting with the other in front of the car, and then as the car comes by him. Now, when you are shooting with one hand, you cannot keep a cell phone stable in the other unless you were really, really like superhuman with this. As he's shooting, the other hand is jerking. That's why the phone jerks, because then because then as the car is pulling away and crashes into the parked car, he's filming again, right? So they have remember, the Trump folks put this video out. They put it out on right-wing accounts, Alpha News, whatever the hell that is, that puts this out to try to poison us. And they're trying to say this exonerates it. It does nothing of the case. And yet, I had Trumpists, and including this kid from Queen's University, and including the former member of the Senate in Minnesota, a Republican member of the Senate, saying, "Oh, look at this video. As clear as this guy. This shows that he was hit by the car." Nothing. There's still not a single video that shows he was. I mean, that doesn't even show he was touched by the car, let alone hit by the car where it could have caused injury. Anyway, I lay all of this out because, to tell you about it, I was absolutely shaken by this, Tim. I was absolutely shaken, and I can remember, and I remember thinking, this is the same city where George Floyd got killed in 2020. It was in Minneapolis, in a different part of it. And, of course, we know that Floyd story. And I remember shaken by that, by being Floyd. I was shaken here even more than the Floyd killing. Not because it wasn't horrible what happened to George Floyd, which was murder, right? But I was shaken even more by the speed with which the Trump folks came out to justify.
At the government level.
And,
from the presidential level. Yeah,
at presidential level on down. They came down immediately on this. And I think in part you've tapped on why they did. They had a PR problem immediately because Renee Nicole Good is not black. And she's not Hispanic. And let's just put it out there. She's white. And she's a mom. And she's a poet. And she plays the guitar badly. And it's like, oh hell, we killed a white middle-class woman. Damn. And that's why they American born, not an U.S. citizen. Woman. Yeah, they're in like studs up on this. And But let's talk about why it gets even more disturbing, because I can tell you it's a hell of a week. This is like last Wednesday, and we're coming into this. Far from settling this down and de-escalating, what do the Trump folks do? The Trump folks have said, Kristi Noem continues to repeat that Renee Good is a domestic terrorist with no justification whatsoever. They trotted her out on the weekend talk shows where she was spewing all kinds of nonsense. She says, we're going to send hundreds more ICE agents into Minneapolis. What? You just had a murder. You're sending not murder, sorry. You had a killing. You had 100. You're sending hundreds more than that? And they are sending them in. And in the last few days, they're going into restaurants. They're going into parking lots. They're going into petrol stations. Fortunately, some people are filming this. And they're just hitting everybody. Citizens, immigrants, everybody. They're taking them down to the ground if they have the least pretext to do this. And they're using this phrase. See if this resonates with anybody. May I see your papers? Mm-hmm. May I see your papers? Now, some of you know you're
not to just immigrants,
anybody. Yes. Now, a reminder. Those, if you know your European history, may I see your papers? Think exactly where they are. Now, another reminder. ICE has no legal authority for that type of question to people. Think through this. Beyond the fact they're unidentified and masked, where is your legal authority here? You only have a legal authority to demand papers if you have probable cause. Mm. Or if an incident has occurred. If someone has committed a possible infraction crime, yes, fine. If someone has run a stop sign, if someone has run a red light, ICE can use that to try to sweep. Okay? They'll use that as the way in, right? If they see someone who looks like, they might be committing a robbery or whatever, yeah, of course ICE can go in there. That's absolutely. But they have no probable cause to go up and ask to see someone's papers, which they've been doing to Uber drivers, for example. Because what they're doing is they're going in and they're doing it on the basis of profiling. They'll go in, and if someone looks Hispanic or even if they're Somali, right, they'll just sweep in. You have no legal right to do that. Now, the problem here is that how are we going to challenge that in the courts? Because this is happening so quickly, and it's just snowballing all the way through. So ICE are physically using force against other people. They're not shooting them at this point, but they're physically using force about people. You have restaurants that are closing. And I will recommend, by the way, anybody that wants to follow like up-to-the-minute videos, documentation stuff on this, Aaron Rupar, R-U-P-A-R, Aaron Rupar on Blue Sky is absolutely top-notch. And Aaron is from Minneapolis by choice. And so therefore, Aaron, he's the one that came out and said, yeah, my favorite Mexican restaurant just closed indefinitely because in a Trump voting district section of Minneapolis, by the way.
Wow.
Anyway, so ICE they're doubling down. They're putting more there. They are now threatening. Some people are now threatening the prosecution of the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Waltz. Or sorry, not Jacob Waltz, Jacob Fry, and the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, right? And why are they doing that? Because Fry and Waltz are not backing down. They're calling for ICE to pull out. Mm-hmm. And it was Fry, and I'm going to tell. I have great respect for both of these men, by the way. I've heard Tim Waltz speak a few months ago in Dublin. I was in a small session with him. He was superb. Fry, I have not met, but I've seen the way he's handled himself, including after the Floyd murder in 2020. And Fry's reaction hours after Renee Nicole Good was killed and after she was called a domestic terrorist is just a classic video you should see in terms of a politician being human.
Yes.
And coming out and just saying, just the pain of the community being ripped apart by this and this woman being killed. And just say, ICE, get the fuck out. Right? Mm-hmm. Get the fuck out of Minneapolis.
The Trump administration got offended by that, apparently.
Yeah, they got offended by that. And his response, which he said in several interviews, he told you, okay, let's compare the two things here. Right? Yeah, okay, I dropped the F-bomb. But an innocent woman was killed, and I used the F-bomb. Which do you think is more significant here? Mm-hmm. Right? Upshot of all of that. I went in, we're talking on a Tuesday. I come in on Monday, and you've gone through the weekend. The weekend really didn't slow down, but it's a little bit slower. And I come in on Monday, and it's going to be like I had 4 big interviews yesterday. I did 2 video casts, a podcast, and then an interview. Some of it was on Iran because of what's happened there. The media have finally noticed that, even though it's been going on for 2.5 weeks.
And I think we might have to have a whole episode on Iran if things progress, because I lived in the Middle East, and whatever happens in Iran, it will be a very big deal. I mean, in a way that I think is unprecedented. So, yet again.
Happy to do that. If you don't mind me plugging it, if you go to the Byline Times podcast, it won't be as good as the one we do. But in fact, I was on with an excellent journalist of Iranian descent, Daniela Sepri, and who is based in Germany. And it was a great discussion, about a 30-minute discussion on the Byline Times podcast, which is run by Adrian Goldberg. Yeah. And so, but meanwhile, I had spoken Times Radio, again, great people, almost as good as what we do here. Times Radio have just relaunched their YouTube channel, and they have a separate Trump Report channel now. And I had the honor of being the first guest on their new Trump Report channel.
Yeah, that's the one I watched. Yeah,
and you could tell, and and they give me space to cut loose, and you could tell just all this pent up emotion just was coming out yesterday. And in the middle of it, I came up with, first of all, apologies, and I've been called on YouTube quite early. You may notice I keep emphasizing the agent's name is Jonathan Ross. And I had an absolute brain fart and kept calling him Agent Ryan. I think I confused him with, for some reason, I got Jack Ryan of the Tom Clancy novels in my head. And so he's not Agent Ryan, Agent Ross on there. But beyond that, in the course of it, because we're putting Minneapolis in wider context, and I finally, the statement, the clickbait statement is that, Trump White House is the Death Star now, it's the Death Star. And these guys are going after everybody, and anybody who has even a cultural flicker of Star Wars will know what you're talking about. Good versus bad, black versus white, But the thing about Star Wars, including some Star Wars fans going, well, not, the original Star Wars, that is, you should look at this episode, this one is, but it is how dictatorship threatens democracy. And in this case, it is that, and saying it quite flat out, let us be clear, this is an authoritarian regime. This isn't, and I will now break that down for you in terms of 2 terms. When you use the word regime, I can dance around and say, we're just talking about a system, and I'm not making, but in fact, now, if we're using regime culture, we're using a term which is different from government. And a regime here is operating beyond its legal authority. It's operating beyond any mandate that it got from voters. It's operating beyond the Constitution, which takes place. Its accountability is only to itself. And that's what we're talking about in terms of a regime that takes place here. In terms of authoritarian, it does not recognize power in any other place. It doesn't recognize local power, state power, court power, congressional power. It does not recognize the power that citizens have. That's the key thing. It doesn't recognize the power that you and I have if we're in the States. And that is where we are now. And that has to be. Now, the U.S. system is still there. So we're not talking about like Stalin's Russia or even, and this is why I would come back with you a little bit on fascism in a very practical way. I don't think we're exactly where we are in terms of 1930s Germany. Because I would still say you still have the U.S. courts that function, although they have been hindered, blocked, obstructed all along. You still nominally have a U.S. Congress, although the Republican majority, of course, get a spine. Not doing anything. We still have an American media, which at times does try to function as a proper journalist should, even if a lot of it has been corrupted or is now subservient to Trump. You still have that. So you still could say, look, in November 26, the elections could go ahead, the midterms could produce certain results, and this could constrain the Trump folks because of what happens with the House and the Senate. We could game that out. Other people will game it out and say, well, are we going to have legitimate elections in November 26?
I was about to say, what are the chances? I mean, like they're breaking all the rules, and there's that famous video that came out, which there's a lot of speculation whether he knew that he was on camera or not during this Republican convention of some kind recently, where he was saying, if we lose, they will impeach me. So he's already kind of, it's always at the back of his mind that he knows that, that we can't lose the November elections, which means, is that going to be, insurrection 2.0 again?
There's an even more troubling statement. And God help me. So if I wish the New York Times, let's just have a word about New York Times and go, guys, do your damn job. And I'm going to link Minneapolis to the question of the 26 elections here with two New York Times stories, right? The New York Times headline this morning, FBI inquiry into ICE shooting is examining victims' possible activist group ties.
Seriously.
Now, first of all, don't just call her a victim, you clanks. Call her Renee Nicole Good. Say her name in your headline, you Muppets. I don't care if it takes you a few extra characters. Secondly, you have just prejudiced that story. In other words, FBI inquiry examining victims' possible activist group ties, as if being an activist is a bad thing, right? And where did you get that tip-off from, New York Times, that it's investigating the victim's possible activist group ties? Oh, could it possibly be you got it from the FBI or the Justice Department? That instead of an investigation, which is what happened with this shooting? Was it a justified shooting, right? Instead of doing that, you now have the FBI doing victim blaming. And your headline is just fed into that, as well as stigmatizing activism, which means anybody else doing a neighborhood watch, are they liable to get killed as well, justifiably because of this? So New York Times, I like a lot of New York Times coverage. They got great journalists there. But whoever wrote that headline, think about what you're doing. All right? That's one strike. Strike two, on the elections. Last week, the New York Times got an interview with Donald Trump, and he sat down with him for a long time. And they were so thrilled about it. It was like, oh my God, look how long this transcript is, right? Look how long this interview is. Because he dared to sit down with us and he talked to us. Okay, you got the interview. Start thinking about significance here. Think about this significance from your interview. Donald Trump said that in 2020, after the election, he should have called the National Guard out to seize voting machines. But the National Guard weren't in a state to do it. Think about that statement, New York Times. Think about it in the context of what you should know that's already on record, that in December 2020, Donald Trump had a meeting which included Michael Flynn, the QAnon conspiracy theorist, who was a former general, head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and was national security advisor for 3 weeks at the start of the Trump term until he got fired for lying to the FBI about his messing around with the Russians. Also in that meeting, bizarrely, is the CEO of a company called Overstock or something, right? Now, why he's there, right? So he's in that meeting. Sidney Powell, who is a lawyer who constructed a conspiracy theory that the election was stolen through a combination of Dominion voting systems, who had data that was altered in Italy, where the voting machines had been taken, in an operation supported by George Soros, Cuba, and Venezuela. She's in that meeting as well. I'm just going to plug in my computers.
Yeah, sure.
For a second while I rant, and it's live, so put up with the fact it will not look absolutely like 100% clean in edit.
Yeah.
So anyway, they're in this meeting in December 2020, and Michael Flynn tells this meeting, President Trump, because of course, still president, you should declare martial law and seize the voting machines. Now, fortunately, Trump's counsel is there, Pat Cipollone. And he says, you can't do that. You can't go around declaring martial law to seize voting machines. More than 5 years later, Donald Trump tells the New York Times, I should have seized the voting machines. Did the New York Times follow up on that story, going into detail, analyzing? They did not. Instead, this weekend, we got this wonderful interview.
Clickbait
Do
again.
your job. Yeah, do your job. Yeah, And anyway, so upshot of all this is we've rambled around the houses. Is it comes back to what you said at the start. This is now not like there may be an emergency. This isn't. This is a permanent state of emergency, or at least indefinite state of emergency that you have here. Even if they don't invade Greenland, even if they don't seize all of Venezuela's oil, and they'll run into problems on that, and I can explain that in just a minute. This is a permanent state of emergency because they are operating without legal restriction inside the United States. And although court cases are still being filed to pull them back, et cetera, they're disregarding those cases. And they have certain people in Congress that will carry water for them on whatever they do. A guy named Randy Fine, who's from Florida, I'm not sure if Randy is all there in terms of his intellectual capacity, but I don't want to go ad hominem. Let's just talk about what Randy's proposing. Randy's latest wheeze, despite the fact that you should deport all Somalis out of the United States, Randy's latest wheeze is to introduce a bill in Congress to annex Greenland. We're going to annex Greenland. Dude, Greenland is part of Denmark. It doesn't matter what congressional bill you file is part of Denmark. So they got people who do this in Congress. And again, we talked about this before. Part of the problem that we have here is that we've spent now a good 45 minutes on clock to work through cases to details and things and so on. Whenever they do some latest jackass thing, quite often it's deliberate jackassery, if that's a term, because they're going to steal news cycle. And instead of going through the cases systematically to say exactly where they are, you got like some other. Because I've got a piece up on EA Worldview if anybody's interested, by a really good writer who's been writing for him, Mustafa Al-Dabah. And Mustafa has come out today and said, look, it's a provocative piece called Why the Good Fight is Not Enough. And he's saying, look, we can't just talk about doing the good fight here. You've got to realize that you're dealing with opponents who they're not confronting you on the basis of discussion. They're not confronting you on the basis of the law or on the basis of responsible politics. They're doing this through provocative clickbait, disinformation, etc. And if you just keep chasing them, you're always going to be chasing. And Mustafa's absolutely right. You have to come up with a strategy, tactics, and a strategy where you're not always chasing. You have to set the frame. You have to set the frame yourself. Yeah. And I think the frame itself, the frame itself with respect is, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. There's a bit of a delay. Finish, please.
I think the frame that we're talking about here, that you and I possibly set out, is that we now are in an indefinite state of emergency in terms of what, and you have to set that out. You have to set that out and say, look, this is where we are. And we're not going to chase each and every story we do. We're going to set out exactly where that emergency is taking place. And so as we go into, the rest of this week, I would urge people that are watching this, do not take your eyes off of Minnesota, not to chase the story, but to put it into the framework of this is where it fits, this type of emergency. Yeah. If you're following the Venezuela story, as we're about to talk about, you do it not in terms of just chasing the story, but to frame it in it. Look, this is where we are with what fundamentally is breaking international law. Even if you try to claim it's justified to break it because the Maduro regime is a nasty, nasty regime, it's breaking international law. By the way,
it's still active. So even though they've kidnapped the president, the regime is actually still there. It's just a different person running. Well, it's his vice president, right? So it's they have no anything.
Put it into your framework here that what the Trump administration has done is they've not gone for regime change in the end, because that would be too damn difficult. They put it into the frame of that they're trying to say, all right, we'll leave the regime in place, which can continue to repress people. And meanwhile, we're going to take the oil. That's Trump's priority now. We're going to take the oil, even though, and perhaps we should talk about this because I told you we would, even though this is the other side about authoritarianism and the Death Star, is it's not always the rebels that cause problems for the Death Star. Sometimes the Death Star has management issues. So I guess if we want to talk about Venezuela, you wanted to ask me about the fact that that the oil companies themselves aren't quite so sure they want to be diving into Venezuela to steal the oil.
Yeah, I think ExxonMobil CEO told him that all of the plans that Trump and obviously the administrations were talking about, which is that they want to revive oil refineries, reinvest in Venezuela, but the CEO said actually it's uninvestable. Which in the world of business, for those who are in business, that literally means it's a no. We're not spending a penny because it's dead. It's dead in the water. So that means that that whole operation was for nothing. If it's not regime change, it's it used to be for, what was it, narco terrorism or whatever the hell that means, which is not a thing, as I said before. It's not that. Oh, it's oil. Well, now it's not that either. So. What is it?
Okay. All right. So walk it through, first of all, in terms of why the ExxonMobil guy said this. And again, media, do your job.
Please.
Trump is in this meeting with the CEOs from the oil companies. He wants them to kiss his ass. I'm giving you all this oil. You should be grateful. One company is already in Venezuela. Now, its output is restricted because of U.S. sanctions, ironically, as well as Venezuela screwing up the industry. And that's Chevron. Now, what was interesting about that is that all the CEOs are being really careful with Trump. They don't really want to come out and say what's there. But the ExxonMobil guy, either because I don't know why, he just had enough, or he forgot the script, he comes out and says, we can't do that. And the reason why he said this is, and I've got to do a bit more research on it, but I've done a bit on this. Venezuela used to produce 3.5 million barrels of oil a day, one of the largest oil producers in the world. Because of the combination of sanctions and, to be honest with you, just a government that completely screwed up the industry amidst the way that it was just running the Venezuelan economy into the ground. And I know if you're a Maduro supporter, you come on in there, or if you're like an anti-imperialist, you can come in here, folks, but these are the facts. This was not like a regime or a government that actually handled the economy well. Anyway, Venezuelan oil output's down to 800,000 barrels a day, right? So it's like less than a quarter of what it was in the 90s. To get it back up to the 3.5 million barrels as a would require, best estimate from the analyst is it'll require more than a decade and more than 100 billion. That's with a B, $100 billion. Yes. To even raise the output, let's say you want to try to double the output, you want to get to 1.5 million or whatever, you're going to have to probably put in around about 30 billion to get in there, right? And it's going to take several years. That's what it's going to take. You're not going to increase Venezuelan oil production overnight. Now, you could steal the oil that has already come up, and a lot of it which cannot be sold because of the U.S. operations. So you could, and there's, they could seize oil tankers, right? They could do that. But okay, but fine. Once you've seized all those oil tankers and that oil's gone, where's the other oil going to come from? Yeah. So the ExxonMobil guys just laying the reality. What's Trump's response? Oh, ExxonMobil, they're not going to be part of the U.S. companies that are going to go in and get the oil.
Didn't he claim that there was like 25 other companies in the queue without mentioning any names? But he's like, yeah, I've got 25 other companies waiting on the sidelines somewhere.
And because the fundamentalist, first of all, he is an economic moron. I love this program because I can say what I want to. I've said it elsewhere, but I have to be cautious. He's an economic moron. And the fact is, oil industry, and I'm not in the oil industry. I'm not a business guy, but at least I've talked to people involved in the industry. You have got to lay in years of infrastructure to get oil out of the ground. Venezuela's oil, although they have a huge reserve, one of the largest in the world, a lot of the oil's in the Orinoco River Basin. And it is not the easiest of terrain to go in and to drill. And it's heavy oil. There are different weights of oil, different grades. Heavy oil is harder to extract than lighter oils are. So you've got all kinds of challenges, even if, right, you didn't have the political considerations. But now, remember, the regime is still in power in Venezuela. Mm-hmm. The military is still in power in Venezuela. You could have insurgency. You could have a civil war, which is breaking out there because people don't know, do we support the government? Do we support the regime? Do we go against the regime? Right? Mm-hmm. You could have all kinds of scenarios. You don't have a secure situation down there. But Trump won't tell you that. Trump's pretending that once Maduro was kidnapped, it was all completely stabilized, which takes place. So there's where you are in Venezuela. And here's my real worry. When you can't stabilize things somewhere and you're authoritarian, right? So what is it? I don't care. Some people don't like the Star Wars analogy because they think I'm trivializing things. Look, I'm going to keep giving you that because I've only seen one Star Wars film, which was the first one, right? And now people are screaming at me, right? Why didn't you see The Empire Strikes Back, which is the best one, or you know?
Or you could use like if you're a geek like me and my kids, because my kids we spent during the Christmas we decided to binge watch Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, the extended edition. So I guess it's like Sauron, right? For those if you don't want the analogy, but it must be Sauron, isn't it? Surely it's like in control of all everything around him and wants to destroy Middle Earth or whatever. So
guess who watched Lord of the Rings and doesn't like it? Yeah, me. Okay, so I'm going to get myself black marks all around, right? I did watch episode 8 of Star Wars.
Read the books.
Episode 8 of Star Wars. Whatever. Anyway. Go back to where we were, where it's like, okay, you've blown up a planet. You've blown up whatever, the Tatooine or whatever, the project. You've blown that up, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, so you've kind of blown up Venezuela or you kidnapped its president, but Christ, it isn't worked out. What do? Let's go blow something else up. Go feel it. Or Cuba. Now,
is that still, I mean, considering the failure of, because obviously it is a failure now with Venezuela, but they're still going for Cuba nonetheless.
That's the one I'd watch. That's the one I'd watch because of Marco Rubio. Wow. Rubio's got skin in the game here because he's Cuban descent, right? Mm-hmm. And because Rubio is politically ambitious as well. Now, ostensibly, Rubio has endorsed Vance for 28, right? And said that. But let's say Vance runs into trouble in various ways. Who's going to step up to lead the Republicans in 28? So if they could successfully, and that's a big question mark, if they could successfully liberate Cuba, Marco, that's so, and that's despite the fact I think Marco's actually relatively sane when it comes to European affairs compared to the rest of, the Trump wackos. So that's where we are, just emergency status. And that's before I could get you into any other things. I will give you, since we're on the hour mark, let me give you a little ray of hope that came out that almost no one noticed because we're in the permanent emergency. Almost no one noticed. Did you see what happened with Obamacare this past week?
No.
And you're really well read. Really well read up there. Remember at the end of last year that the government shut down because the Republicans would not extend subsidies under the Affordable Care Act?
Yes.
Very, very quietly last week, there were enough Republicans that joined Democrats where they extended Obamacare for 3 years. Now, wow. I still have to look at the details of it, where we are with the subsidies and where they stand. But they very quietly said, no, we're not going to cut off. We're not going to shut down Obamacare. We're going to extend for 3 years. Almost everybody in the press, there was so much crazy crap going on, never didn't pick up on it. Now, what did that show? That actually showed you that certain Republicans, as we're getting into the election cycle, are starting to stake out just a bit of ground, right? Now, they did not do it by saying, screw you, Trump, we're going to join the Democrats on this. This wasn't like a Marjorie Taylor Greene move. Yeah. This was just a much quieter approach that took place and so on. The other thing that has taken place, because it was interesting, when I went into that Times Radio video cast yesterday, they wanted to start off with the Federal Reserve story. Now, usually economics is boring to children. And I say this as an economics major, right? Economics is boring, children. Don't make us toast.
Well, actually, my daughter is doing economics GCSEs. She likes it.
Yay. So. Good on her. Good on it. So anyway, Trump comes out over the weekend and he threatens to prosecute the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell. And Jerome Powell is is a sane person. Federal Reserve is independent. We have to emphasize that. He's been there almost 8 years. He helped get the United States out of the COVID shock with what we call a soft landing. Fed's done a really, really good job. But he won't reduce interest rates as much as Trump wants him to. Now, Powell's gone in May. His term expires in May. But despite that, Trump is so upset with Powell, he's sicked the Justice Department on him to investigate him because of cost overruns on the Federal Reserve debt. Like Jerome Powell has anything to do with that. Well, why do I tell you that story? I tell you that story because if you actually take notice, Republicans, not just Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tom Massey or Rand Paul, they came out and said, don't be doing this. Don't be threatening the guy of the Federal Reserve with prosecution. Now, why would the Republicans say that in this case when they usually oh shit? Because when you go after the head of the Federal Reserve, even if he's only in office for another 4 months, you've just hit at the heart of the American economy.
And the market reacted as well to that news because he had that sort of hostage type video almost where he was like, the government is trying to prosecute me or something like that. And the markets immediately just dive down.
Yeah. When I saw the first few seconds of that video, a friend pointed me onto it. Really good academic and journalist pointed me onto it. And I thought, Powell's announcing that he's stepping aside. And I bet I'm not the only person that clicked into that video thinking it. But in fact, credit to him. He said, no, this is a political persecution effectively, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to do my job.
Yeah.
Exactly what he should have said. But still, it's like you got 4 months before he goes, and is Trump going to do whacked up stuff to just haul him around and haul him off in handcuffs, right? And you have effectively, of course, have not only attacked Powell, you've attacked the independence of the Fed. Yeah. And that's what businesses count on. It's what the markets count on. That because once you get rid of the independence of the Fed, decisions are made not based on good, sound economic sense; they're political decisions. So again, that's like that crack. That's that crack in the Death Star, which doesn't occur because of Luke. Okay, I'm going to extend my strained analogy. It doesn't occur because of Luke putting the fighter into going into the portal. It occurs because the mundane types, the business types, the economic types say, whoa, this is not working out for us. ExxonMobil, this is not working out for us. Business, corp types, Wall Street, this is not working out for this. And before we even get to the Epstein affair, whether that comes back, the glimmer of light, as much as I would like it to be from the rebellion, right? Yeah. You and me and all the other good people, the glimmer of light will often come from those who are within the Death Star, right? And who just say, whoa, wait, no. We're not good.
But see, that's because that's what worries me, and I think it is a good glimmer of hope for sure. Because actually, you and I mentioned this point to you before we recorded as well. That's because obviously going back to the whole Minneapolis situation and the ICE situation. Yeah. All of that is connected. I hope the listeners can see how we talked about different topics, but how it's all connected, and it all goes back to the economy, everything that basically impacts everybody in a major way. But the concern that I'm seeing as well with the ICE situation is it's the fact that now, with Renee Good, it's like people thought, oh, it's whatever that she's done, or wrongly, obviously. But there's this narrative that is emerging in social media that it seems that they are literally now targeting what they call as the left, right? Because they call them Antifa or whatever. That's the excuse. And we've seen videos out there. Basically, they're attacking other women, for example. Like there was one famous video that went super viral, actually. A woman with I think she had a blue hair, green hair, which in their eyes, she looks like your typical lefty. And she was manhandled by like 5 to 8 agents or, big dudes. And it was a disgusting thing to watch. But, they, as you said also earlier, Scott, it's like they become more aggressive, etc. So my concern is that now there will be a point where people will be like, you know what, we're going to start taking up our arms and deal with this. America has got a lot of guns. Scott knows that, obviously. But I'm thinking right now, to be honest with you, I'm thankful, but I have to say I'm surprised that we haven't seen people decide taking out the shotguns or whatever, going after ICE. But but I feel it's getting there because they've crossed the line, and people are not going to be quiet. So, which is the reason why I'm saying, Congress and the politicians, maybe they need to be a bit less quiet now, even the Republicans.
First of all, full credit here to Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, to Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minnesota, to other community activists. You look at their statements, and it's in the first statements after Renee Nicole Good was killed. They said, "Look, you're going to be angry. You're going to want to protest. Yes, do it peacefully." They said, "If you don't do it peacefully, this gives them the pretext to come in even harder." What you just said, and so far that is what has happened. Jacob Frey, bless his God, he came in and he pointedly said it. And he had the Minnesota police chief, I think, alongside him, quite right too. So he said, "We've had two. I think it's killings this year. We've had 2 killings in Minneapolis this year, and 50% of them were by ICE." Okay. Yeah. Let that sink in. And so far, and you have to remember, and I'm not in any way taking down the Black Lives Matter protests, which were absolutely justifiable. But in Minneapolis and the immediate after that, because people were angry, people were frustrated, and because there were agitators there were businesses that got burned, there was violence, and you saw how the Trump folks used that to undermine the protest.
And I should say there's evidence that there are ICE agitators as well, so people need to be careful with that. There are ICE agitators kind of hiding amongst the crowd to try to, stoke violence and so on. Yeah,
they will do, and it will get worse before it gets better. Because look, when you wound an animal, when the Trump camp get wounded because things aren't going well for them, and they're on the defensive, they will lash out even more. You need to realize it. So we're talking darkest before the dawn here in terms of what happens. And that is, of course, not just going to be in Minnesota, because these folks, ICE have deployed in other cities. They've shot people in other cities. They could do it in other cities. They could be mobilized anywhere. And I think I've got to shoot off for another interview in just a second. But just beyond thanking you for this, it's just to say to folks out there, whether you're in the U.S., whether you're in the UK, which has its own issues, if you're in Ireland, where I live, wherever you are, just in terms of your communities and your neighborhoods, I almost think of it now as a giant neighborhood watch, that we have got to have each other's back now. We've got to have each other's back in terms of when we're on media to get proper information out that's going on. We've got to have each other's back when in terms of political activism, in terms of what we call for and so on. And we have to have each other's back in terms of security wherever we live. But in doing it, you're absolutely right, Tim. We've got to be 2 steps ahead of them in terms of not giving a pretext for them to justify their assault. And this is where the Star Wars analogy breaks down. At the end of the day, as much as you might want to talk about an armed rebellion, right? And Luke flying into that portal and so on, it don't work out that way in real life. It don't work out that way in real life. You've got to talk about that type of grassroots activism, that neighborhood watch, which emphasizes protection, emphasizes cooperation, emphasizes community, and don't let people tell you it can't be done because of social media. Don't let them tell you that. Because we can make voices heard, and we will have more opportunities to make voices heard, because there will be people who were Trumpist who they will be upset by this past week as well. Not everybody who's a Trumpist is out there for absolute power. They had various reasons why they supported the guy, and those reasons are being peeled away.
And we've seen the evidence in New York. Like, a lot of Trump voters voted for Mandani, so I think it's important to highlight for sure. Yeah, and but they've lost Minnesota. That you can guarantee. This election, they have lost Minnesota. But anyway, thank you, sir. Thank you for fighting the good fight, as always. Yeah, well, thanks for being part of it. I really appreciate your time, man. I mean, like I said, this is like, I feel like this is like group therapy for all of us. Hopefully it's a therapy for you as well. So, all right. Onwards and upwards, okay? Likewise, man. Thank you so much. Well, my friends, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before I go away, if you are on YouTube, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. It really makes a massive difference for the growth of our channel. And if you're following us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you need to give us a star review. Apparently, your following means nothing unless you give us a star review. Don't ask me why, but give us whatever star review that you think is fair. And if you're not following us, what are you doing? Come on, man. It doesn't cost you anything. It really makes a big difference. I really, really appreciate your support. But also, if you've got cash to spare, consider to become a founding member. We are an independent medium. We're not reliant on any kind of company that gets money from Russian oligarchs or any kind of weird sponsorships or anything like that. All of the companies that work with us are genuine companies that I know and I like. But ultimately, it's the members, you guys, our subscribers, our followers, our founding members, or those of you who actually just donated us like $1 here, a couple of bucks there, $5 there. All of that makes a big difference. This is what makes us truly independent. We're not chasing clickbait because we don't want clickbait. We want facts. We want the truth. We want something that we can all aspire to and something that truly make us at least work harder to make the world a better place. Not just talk about it, but actually make it happen. And of course, it supports all of our campaigns as well. So my friends, thank you so much. Much love. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.